Alrighty, let's see how fast we can do this. I'm getting my laundry done today, so there's that. But I'm like, okay, so there's a hundred. They have push rods for air cooling engines. What? Why don't they just offset it like slightly? Like each bank could be like a zigzag type of engine, or engine, cylinder bank. It doesn't really make much sense, truthfully. Like that they would do that. Not to mention, it's like, well, if it's push rod, why don't you just put push rods on the bottom of the engine cylinders, with the crank off of like a basic pivot or something, or like just have it extend a little bit further, and then effectively have a secondary lobe that pushes it, a secondary push rod next to it that goes a little bit further up. And it's like you got four of them. Why don't you just do that? I just don't really quite maybe understand that kind of problem. But I don't know. Like for me, it's like, oh, there's a secondary fuel injection system. So what is this, like port and direct or some shit? Or is it like they inject like a direct injection after it's burnt, like I do in a lot of my concepts? Not to mention, it's like they have a balancing shaft for 120. Why don't they just use nail bill pin? And as it rotates up and down, like you can just fucking like, oh, I don't know. Hell, fuck it. Just use a basic axle gear set. As it rotates, why don't you just use that? Then its connection area can just have like a hollow fucking shaft counterbalanced to a degree, with something else inside. I just don't really understand what they were doing for this. Like aviation engines have this issue. I saw this issue long ago. I don't. And they're looking for compact and all this. I'm like, why do you need overhead cams? You have a big old engine block from this flat. You can have an overhead cam, two of them, right? Okay. Watch. This is shit called hydraulic fluid, and then, okay, you listening? I can have one shaft, one crank shaft go to one camshaft that will push in multiple sections four tiny little fucking up and down. It pushes it up and then it pushes it back down, like Ducati does, kinds of styles of valves. Like what? Hydraulic fluid's still 1-to-1. Well, it has a pulse of a given type of, you know, pressure wave inside of the system. And I'm like, yeah, no, okay, sure, but like, I'm pretty sure you can overcome that. You know what I mean? And like for that matter, I turned it into like, why don't you just get rotating valves? Like literally just circular rotating valves would be fine. Use one singular freaking like little axle to like two little, or really it's a conical gear that'll go to like one single differential type gear set that goes to like all of the rotating ring valves that are just connected to each other and properly timed off of that. Why don't you just do that? It doesn't really make much sense. I don't really get it. Like everything they have currently right now is just like, why is this being done this way? This seems old and lame and heavy and complicated and a lot of friction. I mean, I can make bearing, like rotating little bearing gears, effectively, because that's all that would really be incredibly lightweight and low friction. And they're still going to be sealed. They just need them to exhaust during that given point in time. You know what I mean? So I just don't, like, there are multiple ways to mount this fucking thing to effectively, like, I need, how many? I need for 6 times fucking 4, 24 rods. I need 24 fucking rods. What the fuck is this? If I want to do a push rod, I need 24 valves? How about like 6? You know what I mean? Like, why don't I just do 6? Why don't I just do freaking 6? Why don't and for that matter, I'm like, why the hell don't I have an injector system that's just going to inject air and fuel together, and then it burns that fuel, right? Like, why don't I just do that? It's like a two-piece freaking type of like little design, right? It's gonna be maybe a thick side, okay? So like the round, it's a ring, and there's an arrow spike down into like a little tiny, you know, hollow to that little arrow spike that it injects then the fuel that you're looking for. So that way it just injects air and fuel together. Like I've been trying to design. Well, I already have designed for what it's worth. Is in my concept videos, but it's well, creative ideas playlist. But it doesn't really matter because it's like, okay, well, that's my rocket injector essentially, right? It's like right. But you know what I can do? I can time that off the damn camshaft. It's like, why is it that this propeller has this stupid like cone thing on it? Like that's a ram air. If I've ever seen a ram air, that's a ram air. Like what's that's a ram air area. Like why isn't that just ramming more air into my engine? Why isn't that doing? That's a ram air supercharger, and then it's just like, well, what's this exhaust over here doing? Like honestly, right? And it's like, yeah, no, okay, but I'll just make that my engine casing block thing. You know what I mean? Like this is where my crankshaft casing is. That'll just be my turbine. You know what I mean? It just dumps out at the bottom. Why am I doing it weirdly? Like all this heavy weight. Why don't I have like on my crankshaft here for the flywheel, all that? It's just talking about a prop, like, gear reduction. I'm like, just get a CVT. Why don't you just get a fucking CVT? So that way, like, you can set based upon your altitude, your desired, actual airspeed and all that. Like, the type of RPM for your prop. Like, why don't you just do that? Like, that can literally just be your flywheel. You know what I mean? Like, that's just your flywheel. Yeah, like literally that. It makes no sense. That's so fucking heavy what they have. It's so unreliable. It would make no fucking sense. I'm like, I can put right in front of that the engine, but right behind the prop, this thing called a fucking radiator and air fucking cooling and shit, right? For my compressor. Just like that's obvious. I can just do that. It like why do they do it this way? That makes no fucking sense. It's like let me just make it way more complicated, way less reliable, way heavier than it needs to be. And then it's like, look, remember this like anti-gyroscope, inline four that I did that has like perfect balance? I'm like, why don't I just do this? If it's you need six, okay, I'll give you six. I'll do 3 and 3. I'll put the opposed piston version together of that type, which I'll describe that really quick because it's like, okay, it's opposed piston because I have injector that's direct injector effectively, so I don't really ever need a manifold. Okay, give me a second. All right, I paused this in between that moment and this moment. Try and see. I got a minute on my spin here for my laundry. But all right, so it's like, all right, so I've got an opposed piston kind of thing. It's like, well, I have injectors. I can do the center and outside of the injectors with effectively seals, and then in between each one of the cylinder banks, it has a pivot area, right? But it's like, it's really at the top, all right, and so it's also not really fully pivoting. Okay, just as an FYI, it's like it's pivoting, but then I have a rotating gear set that allows for it to fully extend. But instead of like extending a big long rod, okay, like by spinning something, and then it's like on a thread or some shit. No, I don't want to do that, obviously. Right. So it's like, no, they're on cranks, but they're on a crank that allows for me to then have a different type of pivot system, like, because it's going to be attached to that, but then that is going to rotate off of. That's a good way to put that, because I saw this guy do this inline four, excuse me, where there was 4 cylinders that go off of a single pivot point off of a crank, right? And he's in Germany. I'm like, I could do you one better. Like honestly speaking, I can do you one way better if I do that. I can do you one way better because I can stick it in between each one of these cylinders. And then I can have that ultimately rotate a standard gear set and then there, you remember the Formula One inertial dampening suspension, right? And then it's like, all right, so that's my counterweight, right? But it's like I need something to rotate anyways. And then it's like, right, but I'm not fully done yet, okay? Not only do I need something to rotate, I also have this thing called like, I don't know, oil and coolant. It's like, look at my harmonic balancer that's just a pump. It pumps. It did the pumpies. So for each one of the things, it's like, I got pumped. But it's like, no, no, no. I did this fully balanced engine with effectively one cylinder bank and another that are going towards each other. So one goes up, the other two of them go up, and the other go down. Well, now because they're opposed, it means like I don't need that. You know what I mean? Because I have this turbine, fan blade in the center, in between two banks of three cylinders, right? I then have the ability to do a little bit more special work because then this turbine blade can help rotate my crank and balance those Formula One inertial dampeners, which can also pump coolant around, which also allows for me with those pivots to rock it back and forth as per normal for each cylinder, while still ultimately giving me that rotation in between that heads towards the turbine, which then also goes towards the crank. Then I can have it dump off to the sides or just straight down, whichever side you really want, or both of them, if you so choose. Which is a really good idea to reduce and compact. Okay, but it's like we're not even fully done because it's like, remember the CVT didn't go anywhere. I mean, that's just a conical or a ring, or a conical and ring, which is two balls. So it's like you have a ring and then you have a ball, and then effectively, as a result, like of you moving the ball, it changes your gearing, right? Same thing with the conicals. As you move the ball forward or rear, right? That gives you different gearing for your prop. As now they are fully balanced and do not have gyroscopic, which is great. Because, of course, you have an opposing Formula One inertial dampening system, which is going to need to be there anyways, because it pumps your engine coolant around, along with the the harmonic balancing pump, which is great. Okay, so it's like all of that, because you only really need kind of two. This is redundancy, just as an FYI. I usually use two, just as a redundancy. You only really necessarily need one, but two means reliability, redundancy. If something fails, oh my goodness, well, at least I got that. So it's like, that's great. Exhaust is always pretty much nominal right where you need it. Engines can be cooled off of, a radiator. You can still air cool them too around that, right? Which now, because I can push with this nitrogen filter and the Ram Air Super Turbo that I always use, like I literally just never get rid of Super Turbos. I love Super Turbos. So it's like, right, now I can burn on any fuel, truthfully, like any fuel, gas, liquid fuel. Technically, if I can shove some hydrogen, or solid into some hydrogen or something else, right? Like that's fine powder. I could use that too, but like I never really get into that one because it's like, well, it does burn quite quickly. There's a lot of extra energy there. I don't know if I want to do that. Especially when it's like, well, I usually like to use liquid fuels or gas that I make liquid, and then because of pressurization, like propane, if I push in propane and then it'll boil off, it's already quite cold, quite pressurized, and then that helps with engine cooling and efficiency, but also means I can pump in the pure oxygen because they have nitrogen filters, and it's a ram more air and all that, and then you get higher altitude, it doesn't matter. Point is, I start getting more efficiency at being able to burn that exactly as I want, as I can push the oxygen in and still cool it with that fuel, with the injector, that is, right? So that way it doesn't melt as it goes from its top dead center or near top dead center and continues to accelerate towards its center, right? And I was like, why not just do that? That seems like way insanely small comparatively to them, with far higher amounts of power and efficiency and torque and all the rest of it. That with especially when it's like I need my RPM and it's balanced. It's like I can do a cross plane type of thing, which means like I don't I don't really ever need I don't really need it to really ever be anything other than have no like anti-gyroscopic, because it's like those are ring gears, right? So like, or not ring gears, ring valves. So as they spin around the cylinder, they'll open up for just exhaust when you need it, right? Which means you can counter rotate them. You don't have to have them only be rotating perfectly, right, in sync, the same direction, right? So it's like you can counter rotate them. Same thing for the pistons. Is like, well, they're opposing, so one's opening, one's that. So everything's in lockstep, perfectly gyroscopically balanced as best as really reasonably possible to assume. Yeah, especially when it's like, well, I have a turbine here, and it's like, right. That can be a counter-rotating turbine. There's nothing saying that they don't exist and they can't be used. Same thing for my gears or my axles, right? For my crane. So it's like that can also counter-rotate. Like everything can counter-rotate. And then it goes to, hey, I have counter-rotating, well, technicality, not really, but the ring to the CVT, right? And that allows for a very gyroscopically, very compact, stable, powerful engine. I just don't really get why they would do what they do currently. It's like there's ways to upgrade what that current engine is, if I'm being fucking brutally honest about it. It just seems kind of lame. I mean, that's not even getting into like, engines like what they currently have, but with this 120 degree V6, it's like, why don't they just do different things that are not that? It seems like it's kind of counter to what it would really probably want to be. You know what I mean? Like instead of a V6, why don't you just do like a straight like mine, or fucking. I don't really understand it. Just because it's like it just seems like it would be because of the balancing shaft. It's like I don't know. I mean, I just I don't know. Like there's a way to upgrade it without even needing the balancing shaft, which is another problem because it's like, yeah, sure, it's a V technically, but then it's just a pivot system where in the middle there is the crank, right? And then it's just like a standard counterweight system, right? So, uh, and then it's just inject air and fuel instead of needing valves, which even valves, it's like, well, do I even need the rotating valves? Like I can just open, like say, hey, it's just this, you know, rotated, and then next thing you know, like the whole thing's open, right? Like that's a genuine thing. Like camera apertures, right? Or totally something that can be made more robust and able to, as it rotates, it curves inward, but also opens, like our pupils do. So it's like they'll then open, and then like that would allow for like these little, uh, sliding down like a bearing, like a sliding bearing would allow for these little arms, triangle, 4-point triangles, to then go down to the center and then have a verbose from the side moment where like no, I am very close, and you're not getting past. So it's like I slid open, and then the same thing for the injector thing. It's just like, well, there's a rotating part where you need like the what's it called, camshaft, right? Like you need the camshaft, and it's like as it rotates, that'll rotate like a pump on the inside of it that can go down and up. But it's like, I was thinking about it for mechanical, so that way you don't have to have electrical and like dynamic, variable valve timing duration, stuff like that. And it's like, well, based upon like kind of like air pressure or spring of some kind, as it goes and spins during that moment, it'll effectively store a given bit of, pressure and information for the next moment of when it needs to open up. So that way it effectively stores a little bit inside of the chamber, and then it uses that extra pressure to fire it. And then I'd have to get deeper into it, but it's not on one of my current designs. This is just a React video, okay? But this is like, okay, that's cool, that's neat. Why don't you just do it not that way and this way instead, because it's better? But I don't get it. It doesn't seem like that'd be a very practical way of doing it. Um, it seems like that'd weigh a lot more and it wouldn't produce as much energy or be as efficient. So I don't get it. And I'm not trying to be a dick. I probably am to them, but it's really honestly, I'm not really trying to be a dick. It's just like I don't see why that would be why you would do that way. Doesn't seem. I mean, you have to spend so much money to make. Oh, because they already make those engines. That way, it's cheap for you. You don't have to set up any new manufacturing or anything. That's probably what that is. You'd have to develop something new, and you don't like that. That's what that is. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. That's probably what that is. Anyways, I hope the guy likes my video. The Let's Go Aviate guy. He seems like he's pretty cool. He'd probably know what I'm talking about. Anyways, uh, please like and subscribe and share it. Uh, bye.